Chapter 177. Shizun pretends to sleep. Chu Wanning had gone 2 days without sleep. He had fallen into a deep slumber. Moran quietly drew him into his arms and carried him to bed. His movements so gentle, Chu Wanning never stirred. Moran placed him in the very middle of the bed. Cradling the back of his neck, he laid his head down softly on the pillow and pulled the blankets up over him. But after tucking Chu Wanning in, Moran didn't step back. He fixed his eyes on Chu Wanning's face. Inch by inch, his infatuated gaze drifted from Chu Wanning's sooty eyebrows down to his pale lips. Gorgeous. His Shizun, his Wanning. How was he so damn gorgeous? After sneaking a few more glances, Moran's heart softened, while a certain other part of him did quite the opposite. His scalp tingled, but reason was a yoke around his neck. He knew it was wrong, but Chu Wanning's face was so close, just a breath away, and the faint scent of high-tongue on his body was like an army of pliant talons piercing Moran's facade of respectability, enticing Moran to shed his clothes and join Chu Wanning in this warm bed. Perhaps it was the surging of Moran's blood like a rushing river, or the beating of his heart like an unstoppable war drum, or the scalding heat of his blazing gaze that woke Chu Wanning. Whatever the reason, Chu Wanning abruptly blinked open his eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Moran was stock still. As Chu Wanning's drowsiness gave way to astonishment, he met Moran's fiery gaze with wide eyes. He jolted fully awake at once. "What are you doing?" The strong and gallant youth wore an inscrutable expression. As he slowly leaned down, Chu Wanning froze in alarm. "You!" Moran drew closer still. Chu Wanning's heart thumped wildly. With a soft swish, their surroundings went dim, plunged into a suggestive gloom. But after he'd pulled the bed curtain closed, Moran straightened and settled on the edge of the bed. Looking down at Chu Wanning, he said evenly, "I saw Shizun fell asleep, so I wanted to close the curtains for you. I didn't mean to wake you." Chu Wanning didn't make a sound. Propped against the pillow, he raised his head slightly to gaze at Moran. The dull yellow of the drapes fluttered idly behind him, and the candlelight from the table had become nebulous and hazy, like fog gathered on a window in winter-time. It was too dim to read Moran's handsome features. There were only 2 shining eyes in the dark night, brilliant as fallen stars. "Shizun," Moran said without preamble. "There's something I want to ask you." Chu Wanning held his tongue. In the darkness, this disciple seemed to have screwed up his courage. Chu Wanning's heart seized in his chest. Is he going to ask me about the brocade pouch? He wondered. His face remained impassive, but stormy waves surged in his chest. Was it too late to pretend to be asleep? "Where should I sleep?" Moran asked. Chu Wanning stared at him in silence. Immediately after asking the question, Moran began to have regrets. His overeager and practically ravenous body had no business sleeping in the same bed as Chu Wanning. He was no stranger to how terrifying a man's desire could be once awakened. And so, after agonizing over this very question for half the night, Moran came to his own answer. "The bed's too small. I'll take the floor," he concluded. "Is there another set of blankets?" "There is." "Will you be cold?" "It's okay. I'll just add some straw." And so saying, Moran left the cottage to gather a pile of straw and returned to deftly flatten it into a pallet. After the fright Moran had given him, Chu Wanning was no longer sleepy. He flipped onto his side, head propped against the pillow, and lifted the bed curtain to silently watch Moran bustle about. "I'm hitting the hay. Sweet dreams, Shizun." Moran lay down without removing his clothes and pulled the blankets around him. His ink-dark eyes were full of steady warmth as they gazed at Chu Wanning upon the bed. Chu Wanning responded. At Moran's display of apparent obedience, Chu Wanning let out a breath of relief and put on his own show of perfect aloofness. Feigning disaffection, he released the curtain and lay back in his bed. Moran sat up again. "What are you doing?" "Putting out the light." Moran got to his feet and blew out the candle. Silence descended upon the little cottage. The master on the bed and his disciple below both stared into the boundless night, their hearts each heavy with private worries, bathed in a faint glow of golden haichang blossoms and scarlet butterflies. "Shizun, what is it now? Are you sleeping or not?" "I'm sleeping." Moran's voice sounded exceptionally gentle in the darkness. "I just wanted to tell you something all of a sudden." Chu Wanning pursed his lips. His pulse didn't race so quickly as the first time his imagination had gone haywire, but his throat still felt dry. "I wanted to say, Shizun, you don't have to be so cautious when you sleep. You always curl up in one corner of the bed." There was a hint of a smile in Moran's voice, low and mellifluous. "It's a habit," came Chu Wanning's eventual reply. "Why?" "My room's too messy. One time I fell off the bed when I rolled over in my sleep and cut myself on a file on the floor." His words left Moran speechless for a long, long moment, until Chu Wanning asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," said Moran. His voice sounded closer than before. Chu Wanning turned his head. Through the gauze of the curtain, by the faint light of the haichang blossoms and butterflies, he saw that Moran had pulled his pallet over to the bed. Moran lay down once more. "Shizun doesn't need to worry when I'm around," he said with a laugh. "You won't be stabbed by anything if you fall." After a pause, he added, almost carelessly, "I'm here." Chu Wanning said nothing. A while later, Moran heard a soft snort from the man on the bed. "Your biceps are so hard that hitting them might be no better than hitting that file." Moran chuckled. "There's something even harder that Shizun hasn't seen yet." He was, honest to goodness, thinking of his pecs, but the instant the words left his mouth, he realized how filthy they sounded. Panicked, he blurted, "That's not what I meant." Chu Wanning had already lapsed into an embarrassed silence after the first sentence. Now, the atmosphere between them had truly deteriorated beyond saving. Of course, he knew Moran was in possession of a hotter and harder weapon, far more terrifying than any of Chu Wanning's glinting mechanical implements. Forget that accursed cultivation world ranking list he'd glimpsed by accident. He had inadvertently felt the thing for himself through their clothes. That was a weapon, so full of fearsome passion that it sent shivers down one's spine. "Go to sleep," Chu Wanning snapped. A pause. But how could they possibly sleep? The two of them lay in the throes of love's torment, its magma lapping at their chests, so searing, their rib cages were on the verge of cracking. In the quiet of the room, each could hear the other's soft breathing, his tossing and turning. Pillowing his head on one arm, Moran stared at the dancing scarlet butterflies filling the cottage. One fluttered over to the bed curtain, casting its warm red glow upon the gauze. In the silence, Moran suddenly remembered. At Jinjing Lake, all those years ago, the person who had rescued him from the heart-pluck willow's illusion seemed to have murmured something into his ear. He had been too far gone in the moment. Perhaps he'd imagined it. He couldn't be sure. But reflecting on it now, he felt that his ears might not have deceived him after all, that it might have been real. Back then, when he had heard Chu Wanning say, "I like you too." Moran's heart raced. Each seemingly insignificant detail from days past was like twigs and cuttings scattered upon the ground, now sprouting and branching out, tender leaves and vivid stamens unfurling. Nourished by this brazen thought, they grew into a towering tree. His mind was curiously blank, the world a dizzying blur before his eyes. The more he thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. I like you too. I like you too. If he had misheard, if Chu Wanning had never said these words, then why had he been unwilling to admit he'd been the one to save Moran when they woke up from the illusion at Jincheng Lake? It made no sense, unless Moran hadn't misheard, unless Chu Wanning had really said. Moran jolted upright in bed, unable to contain his agitation. "Shizun," he called hoarsely. Silence. There was no response from behind the curtain, but Moran pressed ahead nevertheless. "When I was doing the laundry today, I found something. It was..." Within the drapes, everything remained perfectly still. "Do you know what it was?" As the words crowded to the tip of his tongue, he suddenly panicked. The question came out clumsy and halting. No reply came. The silence stretched. Moran hesitated, his eyes dark and shining. "Shizun, are you asleep? Did you hear anything I said?" Lying on the bed, shielded by the thin gauze curtain, Chu Wanning didn't move a muscle. He might have really been asleep. Moran waited. He reached a hand toward the curtain several times in dissatisfaction, only to stop himself at the last second. "Shizun," he mumbled a final time before lying down once more. His voice was terribly quiet, even fragile. "Pay attention to me." But of course, his Shizun would do no such thing. Chu Wanning was a total mess. He had always taken pride in being clear of mind, but now his head may as well have been filled with black smoke. He lay on the bed, staring blankly at the swirling Hui-patterned canopy in the darkness. What exactly is Moran trying to do? He wondered, his thoughts sluggish and stiff. He racked his brain for an answer, considering every sort of outlandish possibility. The only one he didn't dare entertain was the most obvious. He didn't dare suppose that Moran liked him too. He was like a starving man who had unexpectedly found himself in possession of a delectably crispy meat pie. Because the pie was hard-won and precious, he'd gnawed off the entire crust, but couldn't bear to start on the meaty filling. Chu Wanning listened to Moran's low, harried murmurs penetrating the barrier of the canopy. He soundlessly drew the blanket up, covering his chin, then his nose, leaving only a pair of bright eyes. Then he pulled it over his eyes as well, until he was completely hidden beneath the covers. Of course he had heard Moran, but how was he supposed to respond? His heart thundered, and his palms were clammy with sweat. He felt mortified, backed into a corner. He wanted nothing more than to sit straight up and launch into a fearless tirade. "That's right. I hid that brocade pouch. Fine. I like you. There. Satisfied? Now get lost. Stop asking questions and go the fuck to sleep." He was tormented, on tenterhooks. A terrible itch gnawed at his chest. "Shizun?" Silence once again. "Are you really sleeping?" A long moment later, Chu Wanning heard Moran sigh softly. Lying there in the darkness, head under the covers, he felt despondent, yet terrified. Nervous, yet also somehow warm and tender. His emotions were a muddled mix of flavors, bitter and sweet, and everything in between. He reminded himself to keep calm, but eventually he found himself kicking the blanket in frustration as his cheeks burned with heat.